Welcome to True You Ministries. I'm Stacy Echeverria, your pastoral counselor. I am a licensed pastoral counselor whose own journey has taught me the importance of having a safe place to discuss the harder issues of life. I'm so grateful that you joined me this week. You can learn more about me and my heartfelt desire to help people much like yourself who may be at a place of pain and confusion by calling me at 626-461-3344. That's 626-461-3344, or feel free to email me at info@trueyouministries.com. Now, sit back, listen, watch, and enjoy the show. Well, hello. Thank you so much to our listeners and viewers. Today, I have a two-part show, Leading an Uncommon and Extraordinary Life, and I have special guest Terry Tucker joining me today. Welcome, Terry. It's so good to have you here.
Well, Stacy, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you today.
Yeah. And before we dive in, I'd like to share with our audience a little bit about you. So, Terry Tucker is a speaker, author, and international podcast guest on the topics of motivation, mindset, and self development. He has a business administration degree from the Citadel, where he played NCAA Division I college basketball, and a master's degree from Boston University. Among his diverse professional roles, Terry has been a marketing executive, a hospital administrator, a SWAT hostage negotiator, and for the past 12 years, a cancer warrior. He is the author of the book Sustainable Excellence: 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life, and a featured author of the new book, Perspectives on Cancer: Stories of Healing, Hope, and Resilience. Terry has been published in Authority, Thrive Global, and Human Capital Leadership magazines, along with being featured in the book Audaciousness: Your Journey to Living a Bold and Authentic Life by Maribel Ortega and Helen Strong. I have to say, when I read your bio and I saw the SWAT hostage negotiator, I was really intrigued. I'm like, wow, that was probably, full of adrenaline, high impact, high stress, just amazing. I don't know if you'll be able to share any of that in our show, but, let's dive in, to the topic today, leading an uncommon and extraordinary life. And I'd love to hear a little bit about your own story around this.
Sure. So I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I am the oldest of three boys. You can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall, and actually went to college on a basketball scholarship despite having 3 knee surgeries in high school. When I graduated from college, I was actually the first person in my family to do that. I moved home to find a job because I'm really going to date myself now. This is long before the internet was available to help people find employment. As you mentioned, fortunately, I found that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. That was the good news. The bad news was I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mom care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. After Wendy's, I actually went to work for the hospital that cared for my father and my grandmother. Then I made that major pivot in my life and became a police officer. And part of what I did was I was a SWAT negotiator. After that, I started a school security consulting business, coached girls high school basketball. But for the last 12 years now, I really have been dealing with this rare form of cancer, this rare form of melanoma that has seen me on a drug that gave me severe flu-like symptoms every week for 5 years, had my foot amputated in 2018, and then had my leg amputated in 2020. So it's been quite a journey. It's been a lot of fun, but there's also been some challenges along the way.
Yeah, I thank you so much for sharing all of that. I mean, with all that you have experienced, and I remember the first time that we spoke, I couldn't help but recognize how upbeat, how positive you are. And and that to me is a testimony to the Lord's work in your life as well, right? So I mean, honestly, I don't know how any one of us gets through life without him. And so it just says a lot about him and you allowing him, to work in and through you, because he still has a plan and purpose for your life, regardless of what has happened.
He
So
does.
what a beautiful story. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's incredibly important. A lot of times we like to think, especially, I was an athlete, I was on the police
Mhm.
force, I was on the SWAT team. You kind of start
Yeah.
to think that you're a little bit bigger than you are. And then God kind of, slaps you and says, "Hey, you know what? I'm in charge here, not you. Listen to what I'm telling you." And
Yeah.
honestly, Stacy, I could not have gotten through what I've gotten through in my life without him. Absolutely no way I could have done that.
Yeah. Yeah. Praise the Lord. Yeah. He does tend to humble us a little bit when
Yes.
we get a little bit too big for ourselves, and a little reminder of that he is the one that is in charge, right? Yeah, I don't have quite the story, but my story is more around the emotional wounding and just things that were told to me as a young person. Things like, I'll never amount to anything. And when you have that false belief, then the thoughts around that, the feelings around it, and then the behavior around it will make that true. But I know that the Lord has wired me in such a way as I look back in my life, because I didn't come to know the Lord until I was an adult. So I look back on my life and I'm going, my goodness, I had a lot of resilience. I had this grit, if you will, where I dug my heels in and I was going to prove my parents wrong. And that's what got me through. But looking back, I'm like, yeah, the Lord was there, but I had no awareness of him being there. And I've had three different careers. The one that I'm in right now is really the calling that I had. And so things did not come to me easily. I had to really work so hard, for everything. And I've faced a lot of obstacles in my life as well, and having to overcome so much of family of origin wounding, as well as the messaging as well, which could have kept me under the foot of Satan, if you will, and not living a life that honors the Lord and walking out the calling, that I have. That could have been extremely discouraging for me. And I'm not going to lie, there were moments of, oh my gosh, what is all this for? All this pain and this suffering, because it was just so hard. And then, in looking back, I'm like, yeah, it was an opportunity for me to learn and to grow, but to also put my trust and faith in the Lord, that even in the challenges, he's there. And then also to give encouragement and hope to others who may be experiencing similar challenges in life as well. Yeah. Yeah, I think more so that than anything else is that, our pain becomes someone else's gain.
Yeah, and I listen to your story and I look back on my life and I was just the opposite. I had
Mm,
parents that taught my brothers and I the importance, the value of family, of
yeah,
loving each other, of caring for each other, of
yeah,
supporting each other. And I think that has throughout our lives. I was in law enforcement, both of my brothers are in education. So for mom and dad, it was not what you get, it's what you give.
right,
You should be
right,
emptying yourself out in life with your unique
right,
gifts and talents that were given to us by God for the
right,
betterment, certainly of yourself, but also for the betterment of your family, of your friends, of your community, and of your country. And when you look at that, when you look
yeah,
at life as it's not about what I can get. And so many people, it's all about give me stuff. And if I have stuff, I'll be fulfilled. I'll be happy.
right,
You
right.
won't. You're never going to be
No,
happy with that stuff. You're going to be
exactly.
happy giving to other people.
I agree. Yeah, and the difference too in our families is that I did not grow up in a family where either of my parents were people of faith.
Mhm.
So that makes all the difference in the world. I mean, I had a parent where it was all about how much more money can we have, right? Because of their own experiences with poverty, if you will, or lack. So there was that deficiency mindset or poverty mindset, which I actually had to break free from. And the Lord, my gosh, through an 8-year period, and many of my audience, they've heard me share this, but 8 years of financial and job losses, to the point where I had to be okay with, well, all right, Lord, you brought us to this home, but if you no longer want us to live here, and because I was finding safety in my home, I was finding security in what I had rather than the security and safety in the Lord. And knowing that whatever would happen, He was always going to provide. And so once I was able to release all of that, the freedom came. And then, the Lord showing me that even in my family of origin, where there was always this mindset of lack, I was like, "No, wait a minute. We always had a roof over our heads, food to eat, even if they were hot dogs." As kids, we didn't care,
Right.
and clothes to wear. Didn't we have everything we needed? We did, right? And some people don't even have that. And so really, when I think about it, I'm like, we were wealthy compared to others that don't have a home, don't have food to eat, don't have clothes to wear, right? So that really just helped me break even freer from all of that. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, it's really interesting. The longer that we walk with the Lord, the more perspective He gives us. With regard to what we've experienced. I'd like to go ahead and share with our audience a way to get in contact with you. You can, whoop, yep, there it is. Motivationalcheck.com is Terry's website. That website again is motivationalcheck.com. You should check it out. See all that Terry can offer you to lead an uncommon and extraordinary life. It is not impossible. And, as Philippians 4, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, right? So Philippians 4:13, take him up on that. The Lord is waiting for you to do that, test him at his word. So I'd like to go ahead and move into the next section in our show. And that is, I really like providing our audience with the hope of scripture and God's wisdom. Jeremiah 29:11, which happens to be my own life verse, is that, for I know the plans that I have for you, says the Lord, plans for well-being, not for bad things, so that you can have hope and a future. And the other one was in Joshua 1. I absolutely love the story of Joshua. There's 4 times in this first chapter of Joshua where the Lord tells Joshua to be strong and courageous. In verse 5b, just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will neither fail you nor abandon you. 6a, he tells Joshua to be strong and to be bold. 7a, only be strong and very bold. And then verse 9, haven't I ordered you? Be strong, be bold. So don't be afraid or downhearted, because the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And if you don't know the story of Joshua, he and the people of Israel were moving into the promised land, and they had some work to do. And so the Lord wanted him to know that he couldn't do it on his own, and that he would have to trust him to help him, come into the land and claim it, as theirs. And that, knowing that on our own we're not really able to accomplish all the things that we would like to, but it is in the Lord's strength that we can. So that's just a bit of hope and encouragement for those of you that are listening. So Terry, let's move into some teaching and counseling aspects here of what you offer, and what are some of the things that you offer your clients that can help them get on the road to leading an uncommon and an extraordinary life.
Yeah, I talk about 2 things. The first are what I call my 3 F's, which are faith, family, and friends. That is absolutely in that order gotten
Hmm.
me through this last 12 years of dealing
Hmm.
with a terminal illness. And the
Hmm.
other thing I talk about is what I call my 4 truths. And I'll give them to you. I have them on a post-it note here in my office that
Yeah.
I see multiple times during the day. So they constantly get reinforced in my mind.
Mhm.
So the first one is control your mind, or your mind is going to control you. The
Exactly.
second one is embrace the pain and the difficulty that we all experience in life and use that pain and difficulty to make you a stronger and more resilient individual. The
Mhm.
third one I look at kind of as a legacy type of truth, and it's this:
Mhm.
what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. And then the
Mhm.
fourth one I think is pretty self explanatory. As long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. And
Mhm.
Stacey, I really kind of look at these things sort of as the bedrock of my soul. I just think
Yeah.
they're a good place to start to
Yeah.
try to build a quality life off of.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I like to unpack, each one of these just a little bit, so controlling your mind so that it doesn't control you. I know with so much of the work that I do, many, if not all of my clients are controlled by a faulty belief system. And so we're looking at, what I find really funny here is that, in my arena, it's, we talk about behavior modification, and I'm like, well, you have to really figure out, where does behavior come from? It comes from, what are you believing?
Mhm.
Right? So that's the end product of where we're starting, and that is a belief system. So also too, in the culture, we are seeing that a lot of people are being controlled by their feelings as well. Out of our mind, comes, right, there's the beliefs, there's the thoughts, there's what we feel about it, our responses, and then the behaviors. So um, yeah, this controlling your mind so it doesn't control you. So what are some of the things that you help your clients with regard to how can they get a handle on what's going on in their minds?
Yeah, I mean, you have to understand the mind. The National Science Foundation says that 80% of our thoughts are negative. And that's
Mhm.
really a self defense mechanism, self preservation mechanism that, Stacey, if you got up this morning and said, I'm going to go skydiving, your brain would immediately be like, wait a minute, Stacey, the plane might crash or your parachute may not have. And it wouldn't be, hey, Stacey, this is a great thing you should do. You should get out there and do that. So understand that you're going to have all these negative thoughts. And I'll give you a story that I think kind of illustrates this. When I was in college, I went to a military college called the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina. And one year, one of the presidents of the school was a retired Rear Admiral by the name of James Stockdale. And Admiral Stockdale had been a prisoner of war. He was shot down in his aircraft during the Vietnam conflict and spent 8 years as a prisoner of war in that camp, and actually won the Medal of Honor, our nation's highest military award. Now, I didn't
Yeah.
spend a lot of time around Admiral Stockdale, but I remember being at an event with him where somebody asked him, who were the people that survived that ugliness, that brutality, and that torture? And he said, well, let me tell you who didn't survive. And
Yeah.
these two things kind of surprised me. He said the people who didn't survive were the big, strong, tough guys that thought that they could handle any kind of abuse or torture. And he said the
Mhm.
other group that didn't survive, and this kind of surprised me, he said, were the optimists. He said these were the people
Mm.
that thought they would be rescued or let go by Thanksgiving or Christmas or Easter, and Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter would come and go, and they wouldn't be or they wouldn't be released. And he said
Mhm.
those people died of a broken heart. He said
Oh,
the
wow.
people that survived were the people that understood what they could control, which, according to Stockdale in his position, was basically the breathing in our lungs and the thoughts in our minds, and control that. And Stacey,
Yeah.
that's where I think people go off the rails. We try to control all these things that we have absolutely no control over whatsoever. And what I recommend people do is just take a piece of paper and write down everything that's bothering you, everything that you are worried or concerned about, and then go through that list and cross out everything that you don't have any control over. And then
Yeah.
focus your efforts on the
Yeah.
things that you can control. And I think
Right.
you'll be a whole lot less stressed, a whole lot less concerned, a whole lot less worried than trying to
Yeah.
control all these things that are totally outside our purview.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, what an amazing story. It reminds me of a book too by Viktor Frankl, The Man's Search
Mhm.
for
For meaning.
Meaning.
Yeah,
Yes. Oh my gosh. And
great book.
yeah, amazing, amazing book. But two things that you said. So, control. So, any area that we're looking to control, we don't trust God with.
Yeah.
And with a lot of the clients that I work with, especially in the sex addiction, betrayal trauma arena, especially with the wives, where they are controlling and patrolling where where their husbands are going on their devices, because it's just well, that's a whole other story. But wanting to make sure that they're not violating their guardrails, that they're not going to porn sites and all this and that. And so I would ask these women, I'd ask them, so is all the controlling and patrolling helping you at all? And they're like, no, it's so stressful. I'm like, yes, it is. So tell me why you're doing it. What is the control really attempting to help you with? And they kind of look at me and they're not sure. And I said, is it safety? And they're like, yeah, it's safety. I said, is it helping bring safety into your life when you're controlling and patrolling? And they'll say, no. I go, okay, so then what are you going to do? Right? What are you going to do? Right. It's releasing it to the Lord and knowing. And I tell them, I go, especially, and I'm talking about a very specific arena of counseling that I work in. And even not in that specific arena, but when I counsel couples and we've got one spouse who wants to make sure that the other spouse is doing their homework, they're showing up, and all this and that. I'm like, leave them to the Lord. He will deal with them a lot better than you can.
Yeah, and
And
a lot of what you're talking about, was the same thing when I was a negotiator.
yeah,
We were negotiating with people, and in any relationship, whether it's our relationship with God, our relationship with our spouse, our children, our boss, whoever it is, the overarching theme is trust. You have
right,
to trust the other person. You have to trust God to know what's best for you. You have to trust your
right,
spouse to know that you're not going to go to those porn sites, or you're not going out to the strip clubs or the bars or that kind of stuff. You have to
right.
trust that. And if you
Yeah,
don't have it, you don't have a relationship. If you don't have
exactly.
trust in your relationship, you don't have a relationship. And
Exactly.
that was one thing we always, and a lot of times we were negotiating with people that, one, we'd never met before. Two,
Hmm.
we had no idea what precipitated them grabbing a gun and barricading themselves in a room or something like that. So how do
Right.
you do that? What we did is what we call tactical empathy. I think you can get
Hmm.
rid of the word tactical and just talk about empathy. Help
Right.
me to understand where
Right.
you're coming from. Not agree.
Right.
Now, if you just murdered three people, I wasn't going to say I
Right.
agree with you, but I was
Right.
going to say, help me to understand, because understanding
Yeah.
builds trust, and trust
Yeah.
gets to a point where I can change behavior.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I love that, and that's a lot of well, there's a lot of that I do in my own counseling as well. I'll ask the question, and I even advise my clients. There's another way of approaching this, and that is understanding.
Mhm.
Helping each other understand why you reacted in the way that you did, and maybe you don't even know why you reacted in the way you did, so we have to do some of that work too, right? But going toward, rather than the three survival responses, and that is fight, flight, or freezing and going numb, right? We'll always say, to the husbands, move toward the porcupine. Move toward the porcupine. Give the porcupine a hug. Go move toward it, right? Doing something different than what the norm is will then help you maybe get a different response, because if we're doing the same thing over and over again, right, expecting a different response, that's the definition of insanity. So it's always so filled with fear, because they never know what they're going to get because it's unknown to them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, so much of what you've done in your law enforcement and what I do in my counseling, there's some similarities there, and it really just comes down to human relationships. It's the same across the board. Developing that trust, the empathy, someone understands, someone cares. There's an opportunity to be listened to and heard maybe for the first time, right? And we
Yeah,
don't do and we go ahead. Yeah.
no, I was going to say, and a lot of times, we would be dealing with people that were literally thinking of taking their lives.
Yeah.
And, people always say to me, because we would ask, have you said anything? You mentioned what you're seeing in that. And they're like, no, I don't want to put that into their mind. And we would always say, no, you're not going to do that. If you say to somebody, hey, are you thinking of harming yourself? Are you thinking of killing yourself? If they're not, you're gonna get a response like, no, you idiot, I'm not thinking of doing that. Okay, fine.
Right.
But if you are,
Right.
and you just mentioned it, you open that door, you open that
Yeah.
window to that person that somebody cares, somebody's
Yeah.
listening to me, somebody
Right.
wants what's best for me. So you're not going to put the idea into their mind if you ask them. So if you're
Right.
thinking it, if you've got that feeling that, they're giving stuff away, they're talking about death, whatever,
Yeah.
the mechanisms are, ask them, because you
Right.
might just save their life just by making, well, I don't know how to deal with, you don't have to, just let them talk. Just let them
Right.
get it off their chest. So you're
Right.
absolutely right. You and I, in a lot of ways, deal with the same kind of things.
I know. It's like, and no two people are the same. So you have to approach them, right. And for me, with all of my counseling, I always invite the Holy Spirit into it because he's the one that's the counselor. I'm the facilitator, I'm the guide, if you will. I'm the vessel that the Holy Spirit, speaks through. And a lot of the times my clients will say, how did you know that? I'm like, I didn't know that. The
Right.
Holy Spirit did. I'm not a mind reader. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but it's really we have to develop that empathy. I think that is going to be really, really key. And so much of the work that you do, right? So much of the work that I do, uh, and we all have our experiences. And, how can we leverage what we've experienced then to help others is really going to be key here.
Yeah, and I mean, you
Definitely.
look at society, we're screaming at each other.
I
You're
know.
screaming at me, I'm screaming at you. If we're both doing that, neither one of us can understand what's
Right.
going on. So take a
Right.
step back and say, okay,
Yeah.
tell me what's going on. Tell me how you
Yeah.
feel. Tell me why you feel this
Yeah.
way. Like you say, if
Yeah.
you know why you feel this way, and then I'll tell you. And we don't have
Mhm.
to agree, but at
Right.
least giving an understanding of where you're coming from gets us closer to, okay, this person gets me. This person understands me. And from my perspective, what I was trying to do was to change behavior, to get them to put the gun down and come out and let the hostages go.
Yeah.
And nobody got
Yeah.
hurt. So it was
Right.
about developing that trust. But the only way you're going to develop trust is to understand the person, not scream at them.
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. And when you're screaming at each other, you're not really even hearing one
Right.
another, and then it just deteriorates and it becomes an ugly mess. That's what we're dealing with in our culture currently. Anyway, we've lost that ability to have civil discourse, and we don't have to agree with everyone. We don't have to agree with everything that everyone else believes in. But for me, it is about curiosity. Help
Mhm.
me understand. I always ask that question. Help me understand why you believe that, or because we can go into it with our own assumptions, which could be completely wrong, and then we're already biased anyway. And so, help me understand opens the door then to the conversation, and maybe we'll be able to see something that we hadn't seen before. It doesn't mean we're going to end up agreeing. It doesn't mean we're going to be best friends, but it allows us to treat one another with respect,
Yes. Yes. And,
which
and
we're
that should
lacking.
be, yeah, and that should be our goal in life all the time, to be curious. I mean, we were
Yeah,
always taught as negotiators to use our curious voice. Well,
yeah,
Stacy, you don't think you can do that?
mhm,
Kind of that,
mhm,
say things
mhm.
in that way
Yeah,
so that
yeah,
you're developing trust. We would stay away from how or from why questions, because why questions sound accusatory. Well, Stacy, why
right,
did you do that? Oh, wait a minute. Is he
right,
saying I
yeah,
shouldn't have
yeah,
done that? I can
right,
get to the same answer if I say, well, Stacy, what got us to this point? That's a much
right,
softer question that gets me the
right,
same answer, and it doesn't sound
right,
accusatory. So we used
Right.
how and what questions, tried to stay away
Yeah.
from why
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah, I love that, and I think it really helps with people that are wanting to have a life that is uncommon and extraordinary, and learning those skills, even asking themselves those questions which are softer, because we can be self-accusatory as well,
Mhm.
right? And have that critical voice coming at us. Or, I work a lot with people in helping them unmask, if you will, or identify protective personalities. So the critic is a protective personality, right? The judge, I believe me, I grew up in a household where I was judged and criticized, and so the protective personality that came about from me was the perfectionist, right? I had to do everything perfectly. Well, that's just not even achievable, right? So, really, it's about excellence. How can we be excellent in everything that we do? So, really asking ourselves those questions. And I tell my clients a lot of the time, because they'll say, well, how did I not see this? How did I not know that my husband was living a duplicitous life? And I'm like, okay, first of all, be kind to yourself and extend that grace, right? How could you know? How would you know? Right? If it's not covered in premarital counseling, which it should be, I'm just saying that the question needs to be asked. But when two people are headed toward marriage, they're not thinking about everything that they need to know. They're thinking this is going to be an amazing day. We're getting married. They're so high. They're on clouds 9, 10, and 11. They're not thinking about, okay, I need to be looking for these signs. And they're not going into it, not trusting who the person that they're marrying is, who they say that they are. And so I just tell these women, extend that grace to yourself. And I'll say that to our own audience, instead of asking yourselves, well, why? What can I learn from this instead? How did I get here? I like that. How did I get here? Which allows for more exploration and curiosity rather than condemnation coming at themselves.
It does, and there's a woman by the name of Kat Cole, who's the president and CEO of a company called Athletic Greens. And the thing I like about, she's got this 6 question sort of check-in that she
Mhm.
does with all her direct reports and her husband every 30 days, every month. And it's basically, what's the best thing that's happened to you in the last 30 days? What's the worst thing that's happened to you? What are you
Mhm.
most grateful for? What are you most worried
Right.
about? There's 2 more
Right.
questions that I can't remember off the top of my
That's
head.
right.
But the
Yeah.
interesting thing about that mechanism is it's a two-way street. So she'll
Yeah.
sit down with her husband and ask him those questions, and then he'll turn around and ask her those questions. And the same with her direct reports in business. Oh,
Mhm.
hey, I found out my wife's found a lump in her breast. Oh, okay. Well, if we hadn't been talking about this, I would have never known that. So
Right.
maybe I can understand, I can give that empathy to you where you need it at this point in your life. What if we did that every day with the people in our lives? What if we
Yeah.
checked in once a month? What's
Yeah.
good? What's bad? What's going wrong? What are you worried about? What are you grateful for? What do you love the
Yeah.
most? Those kind
Yeah.
of things, that that's giving you information, as long as
Mhm.
they're honest with you and you're honest with
Right.
them, that
Right.
builds that trust in that relationship.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And also, as long as they're being honest with themselves too, as they're reporting out as well, that's going to be really, really key too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. I can't believe it. We've finished the first segment of our show, and I'm so excited about part two because we're going to get into some practicals now. So the four things that you already mentioned, which is the crux of the work that you do. So now in our next segment, we're going to go ahead and give some practical steps that our viewers and listeners can do. So, for those of you that are interested in connecting with Terry, his website is motivationalcheck.com. I'll also have additional links to his social media pages as well, and a link to his book, which is Sustainable Excellence 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. I'll include that Amazon link for those of you to go ahead and purchase his book as well. Thank you all so much for being with us today, and make sure you tune in for part 2. You've been listening to True You Ministries with me, Stacy Echeverria, your pastoral counselor. I'm a licensed pastoral counselor whose own journey has taught me the importance of having a safe place to discuss the harder issues of life. You can learn more about me and my heartfelt desire to help people, much like yourself, who may be at a place of pain and confusion by calling me at 626-461-3344. That's 626-461-3344, or feel free to email me at info@trueyouministries.com. That email once again is info@trueyouministries.com. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and may God richly bless you.